everybody, Drywall Repairman here. We're just doing a simple, easy video on repairing a seam crack. Basically, the seam crack got damaged by water from above. Either the roof leaked or the upstairs bathroom leaked. Little bit of water came in and it zapped the joint seam. Easy repair. You necessarily don't have to cut it out. There wasn't a lot of water that came in. All it did was buckle the seam, the joint seam. The seams where the two sheetrocks meet each other and they tape it with the paper tape originally. This is a weak point of the drywall. It's just basically tape with mud on it. So it takes just a little bit of water and it buckles and breaks these seams. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dig out the peeling area, the old tape seam. I'm going to dig it out using a 6-inch knife. A 6-inch drywall knife is your best friend in the drywall trade for patchwork and stuff like that. It has multi-purposes. Use it to scrape, use the hammerhead to hammer in nails, use it to mix mud, texture. It's the most used tool. Basically up the ceiling, we're going to go ahead and fix this area just by scraping all the loose stuff. I'm definitely going to get that old tape out. Always try to dig out your old tape whenever possible. You don't just repair tape over old tape, over tape, over tape. You got to get the old stuff out. Also, when you're scraping, try to scrape off a nice piece, a clean piece of drywall. This could be used for your paint match. Always try to keep a piece for your paint match. It makes everything easier when you go match your paint. You might think you have matching paint, and then you look for it and you don't have it, and then you threw away all your cutout pieces. Now you have no way of matching your paint. Once you get everything scraped up really good, always add screws. The water could have loosened up this area, so always add some screws. This is basically a T-joint, I guess you would call it. So it's basically a joint seam and a butt seam where they meet. The weakest point of the drywall. The joint seam and the butt seam. That's why it's a T like this. So we're digging it out. Basically, you can see how the stud's right in the center of it. So we're going to add some screws in it, get it all tightened up. Once you get it all tightened up and everything's scraped really good, you're going to go through and you're going to fiberglass mesh tape. There's a lot of people out there say to use this type of tape, use this special type of tape. Just on repairs, use fiberglass mesh tape. Do yourself a favor. Don't believe all the hype. I use fiberglass mesh tape on all my jobs. I'm a licensed guy. I have to leave a warranty with these jobs. I only use fiberglass tape. I'm sure other tapes out there in the market are great. They're awesome. They're the best in the world. But go ahead and just do yourself a favor and get some fiberglass mesh tape. With this, I'm just doing some spray glue. You don't have to use spray glue, but I have it on hand. I like to use a spray glue here because it tacks up the tape really well. Especially on ceilings, I don't like to tape the ceiling, the patch area, and then I go out to my truck and I mix up my mud and I come down and the tapes fall into the ground because the bond stickiness isn't on the tape. So I just use this optional product as a spray glue. You necessarily don't have to use it. I just like to use it, and I have it on hand in my work bucket, so I just use it on all the jobs, save myself some headaches. Get everything fiberglass nicely. Basically, since you dug out that old tape, your new tape's going to fit in this little channel you dug out. This is good news. It's good news because all you have to do now is just mud in this channel. You're not trying to float out real heavy mud, float out this area, make a big old hump on the wall. You basically created a nice mud channel that your mud will fit in nicely. That's why we like to dig out the old tape. We don't like to put Band-Aids over Band-Aids. We like to get out the old Band-Aid and repair it with the correct Band-Aid. Also, your fiberglass mesh tape is a strong material and it helps prevent from re-cracks. I'm going to go ahead and mix some hot mud. I'm using a 5-minute mud. This is a easy mix. You just add fresh water and mix it. You don't want to mix a lot of it. You just want to mix a pan or whatever you need. I like to do the mix up in a pan method using fresh water, my 6-inch knife. I'm just going to mix up less than a half a pan, like a quarter of a pan. I don't need much for this. If you're not comfortable using hot muds, like I say in all my videos, just use a joint compound. Do not use a spackle. Do not use this other products, this and that. Either use a joint compound or a hot mud. Hot muds are more intermediate professional grade materials, so go ahead and just use a joint compound. With a joint compound, you're going to have to let it dry overnight and then turn around and sand it. Do a second coat, let that dry, turn around and sand it, and either do a third coat or texture it. I use these hot muds because I have to finish these jobs in one trip, so I'm going to get a hot mudded real quickly. This hot mud, I'm mixing it in the pan. I'm mixing it up thoroughly. It has to be pretty thick. First coat muds are always pretty heavy and thick. You don't want thin, dripping wet mud. You want a nice thick mud. We're coating this. We're not making soup here. We're making first coat mud. It has to be heavy. I'm going to use a coat knife. I always use a 12-inch knife. So my 6 and 12-inch knife. The secret to these fiberglass mesh tape is striking it in. See, I'm using my 6-inch knife and I'm basically pushing the material inside the gaps and the grooves and the little niches inside the fiberglass. I'm getting that mud pushed inside the grooves of everything. That's the secret of working with these fiberglasses. Once you get all that mud pushed in there, striked in, now you can turn around and coat it with your coat knife. Most guys like to use an 8-inch or 10-inch or 12-inch or 14-inch knife. My go-to coat knife is always a 12-inch knife. I don't like carrying around a lot of tools and knives that are going to get damaged in transport. So my go-to knife is always my 12-inch knife. A lot of guys like to use a big 14-inch knife, but you need to learn how to use a knife before you start buying all these different knives. You could always coat it out past your coat area and skim it further if you think you need to use a wider knife to get past your work area. A lot of people want to go out and buy all these nice fancy tools, but if you have a lot of tools but you don't want to know how to use it, it's just a waste of money. So go ahead and either get yourself a 10-inch knife or 12-inch knife and a 6-inch knife, and you're good to go for most of these repairs. Once this hot mud sets up, it sets up in 5 minutes. You're going to have to sponge the edges. This is called the slick out technique. This technique is only used with hot muds like 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and 90-minute muds. You let the mud set up. As it's setting up, you got to slick it out. Basically, you're manipulating the mud. You're taking off the extra mud. You're also taking that sponge and you're feathering off your mud edge. You always feather your mud edge where the coat meets the original wall or ceiling. You want to feather it out so you don't see a sharp edge. Slick it out. I'm basically going the opposite direction that I coated in, just getting off the extra mud. Everybody thinks when you go to do drywall mudding, you just cake the mud on. You just put it on heavy and I'll sand it off. I'll sand off what I put on. No, you put on the material where it's needed. That's it. Act like you're fixing a dent in a car. You're filling in the area that needs the mud. You're not just piling on a bunch of material and sanding away what you don't want. You put on only what you need. You don't want to create a big old hump, a big old dip in the ceiling because you caked on the mud so heavy. So sometimes it's easier to add a coat instead of trying to take off extra. So just do tighter coats and it'll be more easier for you as a beginner to do these repairs. With myself, I get away with doing 2 coats. Most of my jobs are always done 2 coats. With the second coat, I'm just going to follow through with a tight skim coat. I'm going to go past my first coat. Skim coat's all you need. If everybody says, oh, you need to put on your coats heavy, let them dry. Well, that's fine and dandy with joint compounds, but with these hot muds, you want to do tight coats. And if need be, go ahead and add an additional coat if need be. I get away with 2 coats with my work, but maybe you need 3 coats, maybe a tight 4th coat. That's easy, just do it. It's easier to add thinner coats than it is to try to take off a big hump on your ceiling that you created because you put on the mud too heavy. Once your second coat sets up, same thing on here with the hot muds. I'm going to slick it out with the sponge and 6-inch knife, basically taking off the extra materials. I skim this tight, but there's still extra materials, so I'm taking it off, slicking it out with my 6-inch knife. If you use joint compounds, of course, in between coats, you have to let it dry and then sand in between coats, and maybe take a wet sponge to take the dust off and then follow it through with another coat. Once I got it all slicked out, I'm good. My 2 coats, slicking out in between is almost like a 4th coat because I slicked out in between, taking off the extra, manipulating the mud. So now this patch is ready for skip trowel. Depending on your area, you might not have skip trowels. You might have a smooth finish, orange peel, knockdown, whatever. The process is the same. First coat, second coat, maybe a 3rd coat. And the texture is just a cosmetic finish. Depending on your region, you might have a different type texture, different style. If you're not comfortable matching your texture style, well, maybe at least you can get it first coated to 3rd coated ready for texture and then hire someone that knows what they're doing. The texture is just a cosmetic finish. Out here, we have a lot of these skip trowels in the newer homes. I live in the Phoenix area in Arizona, so this is a big place. Lots of new homes. Everybody's moving here, so there's a lot of work out here that I do with these skip trowels. Most of the houses that are 20 to 30 years old have these skip trowel textures out here. So you got to come in and you match these textures. And it takes a lot of practice. Makes perfect on these skip trowels. This is just basically a heavy skip trowel, one direction. So we're just skipping it. I'm also using my 6-inch knife. The reason I use my 6-inch knife on repairs is because it gives it a good texture match. Instead of trying to use a big old knife, 12, 18-inch knife to do my skip trowel, I just use a 6-inch knife because it's easier to control, easier to get a matching pattern with the 6-inch knife because you have more control with the knife. So always practice with your 6-inch knives until you perfect those before you start moving up to 8, 10, 12-inch, 14, 18-inch knives, bigger knives. Your 6-inch knife is your go-to, so perfect your techniques with that first. Always practice on old sheetrock, stuff like that. But basically, this is a repair. Seams. Joint seams on the walls, on the ceilings, stress crack seams. It's the same process. This is just a buckled water leak seam, easy repair. You might look around your property and you say, hey, I have a crack or a seam I see. I need to repair it. Well, this is the process. Also, if you have not liked, go ahead and like this video. Also, add a comment. If you haven't subscribed already. It helps my channel get found. Share it with a friend and just do your research out there. Like I said, I'm a licensed drywaller. I do this every day. Drywall repairs every day, every day, every day. So practice makes perfect. Hope you like the video. Thank you.